Hello and welcome to this episode of the Original Medicine Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is MG McCullough. How Clean Eating is Doing Us Dirty has been my most popular episode to date. So I thought that I would do a part 2 to go a little bit more in depth with some of the ideas behind why I think that we gravitate toward these ideas of clean eating. So let's get into it. A lot of the Chinese medicine dietary advice is really contrary to what we hear in modern clinical nutritional advice. For example, grains have become this really dirty thing where everyone is recommending that you stay away from grains, grain-free this, grain-free that. Even people are feeding their dogs grain-free diets. And this is really pretty terrible, not only in dogs, but also in humans. In dogs, they've actually found that grain-free diets increase cardiovascular risk. And in Chinese medicine, we could definitely say the same simply because grains are what we call the middle path, and they are naturally sweet and they tonify the spleen and the stomach. And what this means in regular people speak is that it supports our digestive organs. And without good digestion, we can't make good use of what we're putting into our bodies to begin with. And then that leads to a depletion of resources. Now, our spleen and our stomach are right in the middle of our bodies, geographically speaking. But what's important to know about that is that the middle of our body sends energy up to the top part of our body. So what we're seeing in animals where dogs are having cardiovascular problems as a result of grain-free diets, I think that what I am taking away from that is the same could happen in humans if the digestive organs are not strong. The digestive organs can't help us manufacture resources and as well as blood, and then blood gets sent up to the heart, being an organ in the upper part of the body, and that could lead us to have problems with our heart. All this, obviously, we're talking about from a classical Chinese medicine perspective. This is not Western medicine, but that is Western veterinary medicine, that vets are seeing cardiovascular problems in dogs who are fed a grain-free diet. And arguably, people are feeding their dogs grain-free diets, thinking that they're doing something positive for their beloved pets, of course. And because people are telling humans not to eat grains, surely that should be good for animals as well. And then some people get into the whole idea that animal or dogs were once wolves. They evolved from wolves. And so wolves were not out in the wild eating rice or corn, but that may or may not even be true. So same for humans. When people say, many years ago, there were not cultivated grains. And so our bodies are really not designed to eat that way. That may or may not be true. At some point, we did eat grains. They may not have been as readily available, certainly, but we could also say that back in the day, people were not eating 3 meals a day, so therefore we shouldn't eat 3 meals a day. I don't know that we can exactly extrapolate all data from our caveman days and say that it applies to us now. What I wanted to talk about next is this idea of orthorexia. This is sort of a newish term that refers to people who are trying to do the right thing with their diets and with their health. And we see that in all the dietary trends. People are picking and choosing what they feel is going to work for them, what newest trend is on the market, the newest functional medicine doctor talking about we should eliminate this or we should add this, we should focus on this. Whereas classical Chinese medicine really sees that all food has valuable energetics to offer the body, and that when we eat a variety of foods, we get a variety of energetics. And that means that we're supporting like our entire system, not just one thing. Certainly we can increase some things to have an increased effect, and we can decrease others. For example, if you have been told that you have a lot of heat in your body, if you run hot, if you feel hot, that may be a case where we should incorporate more cooked greens, because greens are bitter in nature and bitter flavors drain, but also greens are cooling. And so when we cook them, we make them more warm and wet, which is easier to digest, making that nutrition more bioavailable. And then in addition, we are cooling our system, as opposed to if you eat salads or drink smoothies or green juices, those are raw and very, very cold. And what cold does in our system is stagnate energy, creating more heat. So it actually could make your problem worse rather than better. So if we want to clear heat and cool people, we do want to eat cooked greens in order to move. That's just one example of how Chinese medicine food therapy conflicts with modern advice. But getting back to the point of orthorexia, I think there are a lot of us who need to control things in our lives as a result of trauma that we experienced very early in our lives. And we all know that our food landscape in America is highly questionable. The way food is grown, our regulations, the way we allow companies to produce highly processed food-like products, it does take a lot of conscientiousness to eat a healthy diet, like a diet that is going to support your health in America. So no argument from me like on that. I don't think we should be human garbage disposals. However, what I'm saying is that many of us over the course of our lives have latched on to different trends, thinking that this would be the next magic bullet and help us get through some health problem that we were experiencing. And I think that what we really see when we dig deeper into that is that we have a need to feel safe or to feel in control, which all humans do. But perhaps what we actually need is to get into why that is and treat with those channels so that we can resolve that discrepancy with ourselves so that we feel safe no matter what we eat. Now, again, am I saying that I think that we should eat Chick-fil-A on a regular basis and we should eat out of a box all the time? 100% no. But what I'm saying is there are those of us who are so committed to specific diets and would never eat a potato chip, for example, that we make ourselves crazy in other ways. And I think that if you don't rectify the deepest level of your energy that has been affected, I don't think it matters what you do with your diet, because I think that deepest layer that has been affected is going to have a more powerful influence on you and your health outcomes, again, both mental and physical, than anything that you could put in your mouth. And I think the opposite is also true. When you're really right with yourself and you feel grounded, you feel safe, you don't feel like everything has to be controlled, I think that you're much more comfortable and you know that in the eating landscape, you are trying to nourish your body, but you're not going to freak out if every meal isn't exactly perfect. Because I think within the orthorexia circles, we get into this, I can always do better. I'm always trying to improve myself. This meal has to be perfect. Oh, this is how I can make it better. I'm taking all of my food everywhere I go because I can't eat that and I can't eat this. Of course, I'm speaking about people who don't have extreme food allergies as well. But I think many of us have been at this place in our life where we have been very, very particular about what we eat. And if we look back on that, if we're past it now, we can see how this was something that we kind of latched onto as a method of controlling our outcomes. And I think to some degree, that is a beautiful thing that we do have the choice of what we put into our mouths. But I think it can also, like many things, become pathological and we can get too caught up in it and thinking that every single thing that we eat is going to make or break our health. Whereas the way I look at things is food therapy in general, even when we are intending for it to be a therapy, it takes time, accumulated efforts. So we're eating the same thing over the course of time, those warm, wet meals to build fluids and to build more resources. It doesn't just happen with one bowl of soup. You may feel a little better after one bowl of soup, certainly, but it's going to take shifting your diet altogether. And this is also a point that I wanted to make on this episode. I really feel like when we're trying to heal something, we have to become a different version of ourselves. And this is very similar to the perspective of the channels. When I treat someone, I expect that they are going to be a new version of themselves, whether small, whether large, there's going to be some change. So when I see a person the following week, I'm not looking back at what I wrote down we did the previous week. And it's not because I don't care. It's because I expect that they're now a new version of themselves. And this week, we're going to hear what's going on with them, take their pulse, and then choose the channel that is best for them on that day to help them get to the next version of themselves. And I think when it comes to dietary choices, we may have been eating in a certain way for many years because we thought that that was the best choice for us, whether that was a trend that we hopped on that made us feel better, or maybe it was just popular advice at the time, because we can all look back and see how there have been different phases, throughout certainly American culture, where they've said, like the low fat diet, for example, fat is bad, avoid it at all costs. Okay, now we realize realized that was flawed. I think now we're getting to a point in the landscape where we can say the quality of food absolutely affects the outcome, and all elements of food are beneficial to our bodies in some way, which is exactly how classical Chinese medicine sees food. We can benefit from everything, but there are certain things that we want to pull back on and especially at certain times in our life. I know I talk a lot about coffee and alcohol. I think that both of these things are things that people regularly drink on a regular basis. They're consuming. People have coffee every morning, they have wine every night, and they don't think anything of this. And that's why I talk about it so much, because I think we are using it in the wrong ways. I personally do not drink alcohol or coffee, but this is not something that I recommend to my patients. What I recommend to patients is to not have it be a regular part of your life. If on the weekends you want to have a coffee with friends or a glass of wine, in a lot of cases, I think that's going to be totally fine. But what I'm concerned about is the first thing you do every morning is drink coffee. And then maybe you have another coffee in the afternoon. And then the iced coffee is like absolutely horrendous for your health, right? You've got the cold and you've got the draining. So we are draining and we're creating stagnation, which creates more heat. I mean, it's just a disaster. And people are doing this on a very regular basis. And I know because I used to do it as well. But this is what I'm saying. We have to think about becoming a new version of ourselves that does not rely on coffee every day to get through the day or to get the day started. So many people say it's this great routine that I have. It's the time that I have quiet with myself. Okay, I completely respect that. And I think quiet time with yourself is really important, but I don't think it has to center around a substance that is doing you dirty, is basically what I'm trying to say. So thinking about the problem that you have right now, you want to shift into a person that does not have that problem. Nothing changes if nothing changes. I don't think it's reasonable to expect that you can morph into a new version of yourself that doesn't have the current problem that you have if you haven't changed anything. And so if you can just keep that in the back of your mind when you are coming up on a problem that you want to have changed, how are you going to get there? What are you going to do different to have a different outcome? I think all of these things matter a lot less. All of our eating choices matter a lot less if our deepest level of energy still properly aligned for us. If we're still not feeling safe, if we're still not feeling good about ourselves, if we're still wondering if we're enough, if we're doing enough, if we don't value ourselves, if we have a negative introject. These are things often that form very, very early in life, and they can be altered. And certainly talk therapy can be effective with the right type of therapy. But a lot of times what I find and hear from people is that their therapist is an empathic ear. The person is listening intently, trying to provide a little bit of an objective feedback or objective listener. However, a lot of times this keeps us stuck in like, yeah, we're right. Yeah, this is how I felt. But it's not actually shifting how you feel about yourself at the root because you're staying stuck in that pattern. Okay, so today on the show, what we talked about is how classical Chinese medicine is drastically different than modern health information, and how the modern nutrition landscape really can be doing us dirty because there's so much promotion of a plant-based diet, smoothies, salads, green juices. This is all considered healthy. And I think that on a regular basis, this is a really significant concern. So that's where I went first here. Then I just want to remind you that getting right with yourself and feeling safe and comfortable with who you are is going to be more important than what you put in your mouth. That progress is better than perfection, and everything does not have to be perfect. So I hope that is a friendly reminder for you that you can make changes and also not be obsessive. And I think the obsessive quality actually backfires. And that's what I wanted to get across in this episode. As always, connect with me on Instagram. It's a great place to ask questions and learn more. If you enjoyed this episode, could you please share it, like it, give me a rating or a review? I really appreciate it. I know you hear this from all podcasters, but us small people need your help in spreading the word. And it really does make a difference when you share with others that you have listened to it and learned something useful. So thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to talking with you next time.